Hello and welcome to Founders Unplugged. I am your host, Greg McCallum, also known as the Pay-As-You-Scale Commercial Advisor. Before we start, just wanted to let you know all these conversations are completely voluntary by the founders who are involved, so please give them some love. There's very busy individuals and they're taking up to 2 hours out of their day to come and sit and chat with me about themselves, about their businesses, and about all other kinds of stuff. Look in the description on whatever platform you're watching this and you will find links to them for their LinkedIn profiles and also the projects and the startups they're working on. So do go and check those out. And while you're at it, maybe give me a bit of love too. I do this as something on the side to my main business. I run a company called ThinkWork. And so if you're looking for any advice, I also do free commercial advice for those for up to 1 hour. That job allows me to do this. Thank you so much. Enjoy the episode. Please do show love and appreciation for them, and of course for this episode. If you enjoy it, like it, subscribe, share. Without further ado, I've talked long enough. Enjoy the episode. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Founders Unplugged, hosted by Greg McCallum.
Yes, it was me. How's that?
I can hear you now, yes.
Hey, brilliant. Okay, good. How's it going?
Very well, yeah. Well, you could say that. Although, I'm sitting here for the inside, talking to you rather than looking out my window. And absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. Do you know what annoys me the most about technological advancements is how we still haven't managed to master the outdoor screen.
Yeah, or just glare reduction, because I can just sit here quite happily talking to you, just like but yeah, it would look really weird. So if we were to do so,
100%. Just like I would love to have an office setup, like a temporary office setup for outside in the garden, but it's just I can't get anything done. I can't see a bloody thing.
No,
nightmare. Someone needs to solve that problem, I think.
Well, someone has solved it this week. We're phoning the night from June's recording, and it's all been about the Apple bloody glasses, isn't it? So basically, just hiding us from reality and having a camera that puts on for reality.
There you go.
Can you imagine when that turns into driving? Like the litigation problems of you're going to be driving your car, but not actually physically be able to see other than through your device. I mean, it's going to be a nightmare.
Yeah, but at that point, the cars will be driving themselves, so it'd be all right.
Okay, so I'm assuming which order the litigation risks went in. Actually, which is a bold assumption that may not be true. Yeah, we may just skip that part and decide we're quite happy to sue the automator.
Yeah, or just not go anywhere.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing, because it's like, if you can just put these glasses on and not go anywhere, why would you? We end up in the Oasis. Have you seen Ready Player One?
I have. Yeah. We'll just end up with like a commuting simulator.
Yes, exactly.
To reminisce about the back in the days when we used to commute to work and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, anyone who's a journalist for Sydney Morning Herald, I'm a dual national Aussie, so his comment just spot on. It's like, I absolutely hate these things. They should be thrown in a volcano, and I want one.
You see, I'm in the different camp. I absolutely love them, and I want them. I love it. I love the tech. I love tech. That's just my thing. Yes, I can see the negatives. Yes, I can. I absolutely can. But I see far more positives than I see negatives.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? For the same reason, like the people criticized the printing press when it came out. Like, there's a reason to criticize and be scared of everything, but ultimately, it's advancement, and I love it.
It also is unavoidably considered. You can't put unless you kill all humans, you can't actually stop any of the tech advancement happening. So what do you do?
Exactly.
There are certain very limited things you can do. Like, so nuclear proliferation is possible because the refinement of uranium into weapons grade uranium is quite hard to hide. There are quite large buildings that are required to do so. But apart from things like that, it's imagining what is possible, and then dealing with knowing that it will eventually become a reality, and then dealing with the ethical, moral, and legislative frameworks around it. But yeah, I mean, obviously AI is a big part of our world, and it's a big thing that's come up, and I keep coming back to things.
We've hit the ground running with this podcast, so we haven't even done introductions yet or anything.
Right? Yes. You recorded this. We should do some formal things.
Yeah.
Is this recorded for posterity, by the way? So should we start it with a hi? I'm Greg.
It's already started. Right.
Let's go then.
Yeah. So this will all be uploaded. I'll keep this all in. Nothing gets edited out. So this is all
okay. Cool. Right. I'm glad I didn't start swearing then.
Oh no, you can swear if you want. want. I don't mind.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but not
so annoyed if I do.
not gratuitously though. Yeah. Okay. Well, look. Yeah. Let's do an official beginning. Not that I have much of an official start to these, to be completely frank. It's fairly casual, as you can tell. Like, this is the way it goes usually. But I like to start them at least with an introduction from yourself and what you do and a bit about your company. I think that's probably a good professional sort of way of structuring this to some degree, and then we can go back to what we were talking about, if you like. Sure. Yeah, take it away. Introduce yourself and the business.
Okay, so I'll start with the business. I'm the CIO of ShipShape.vc, and we are the venture capital search engine. So you come to us to find investors that will get your business. So if you're on here, you can just click try test search just to save yourself the bother if you want. And it will find investors that are talking about, have invested in, there is some evidence to say that they're interested in green hydrogen, for example. Mm-hmm. So, and you have to sign in, by the way. So yes, at some point that will come back and keep annoying you. But the purpose of the business is, Daniel and I founded the business because it should be easy to find the right person at the right company who's going to be into your startup. There are so many lists out there in the world and databases of just investors. But never the twain do meet, and you end up with founders having to do spray and pray exercises, just putting out to random lists. Also, which doesn't get you very far. Also, only concentrating on a local geography. So you sit there going like, well, there's too many people on this list. I've got to spam this stuff out, deal with so many different calls. But why don't I just I'll only go to the people near me. Whereas if you actually get the right person that's talking, that gets exactly your business, geography becomes less relevant. So a real use case for this was, we had someone who was very much into improvements on construction sites, and that was what their startup business was about. And there's a guy in California who blogs. He's a VC investor. He doesn't work in construction. He's a VC investor, and he blogs about nothing but robotics in construction sites and how this is going to change the world. That's his thing. That's his investment thesis, his passion. So put those two together. And you need a search engine. You need the power of search to do that. And the kind of thing that amazed us when we started this business is, the first iterations of Ship Shape really just took, this venture capital world up to sort of the end of the noughties. I mean, we were still like, the venture capital work as we arrived in it, we got here like still in the 90s. Our first iterations took up the noughties. We're now, taking it to modern day times. We are making use of LLM technology, etc. But literally our first iteration, like 2 years ago, just wouldn't have looked out of place on someone's desktop over a decade ago. But that was still considerably in advance of everything else that was out there for particularly founders to be able to use. There are obviously some subscription services which are different for people who've got money to spend, but we wanted to create something that everybody can access and use, and put these two sides of the equation together. So that's what we do. Okay, and tell me a bit about you. What's your background? How did you get into this? Particularly met Daniel, my business partner, the CEO of Ship Shape, at a place where we were trying to do a Series A and lived this problem of going, how hard can it be to find people who are into tax operation or tax operations automation? Quite hard, actually, as it finds out. Find the right firm, find the right person. But that was my fourth startup I've been involved with. From 2014 onwards, got into the startup world, was on the management team for two particular, and involved in sort of two particular companies that exited, and then met Daniel, and we decided to kind of start this ourselves. Prior to that, I had been, I would call myself a middle management apparatchik in a variety of, large companies with spending too much money on programs that I managed. And you can see which side of the world I like. I love working in. I love working in the small company environment. I love working in our spaces where we can really get work done, do things and make a difference quite quickly. Not that there isn't an incredible amount of value of things that get done by these huge companies, like if you are a massive financial services organization, that they really are the grease that allows everything else to happen in entire countries in the world. So I'm not dumb, they are very important, and the function is important. But just where I prefer to work is, the startup environment. So that's to me. So my passion is entrepreneurship. My second passion is tango dancing. So I started tango dancing in 2008, and it's my strong advice is don't start. It's a complete addiction. It will take over your life. Kids don't do drugs. Don't start dancing tango.
I used to do salsa dancing.
Okay, well, you understand the problem then, yeah?
Yeah, because my mum was a salsa dance instructor, or like a helping instructor. She had a friend, and she's massively into that scene. She still goes now. She's in her late 60s, and she's out later than I am on weekends, like going to these bloody things, I totally get that. It's highly addictive, beautiful, because there's some crossover there with tango and salsa, isn't there? There's a lot of these dancers, they sort of they know each other, right, in these circles, and whether it's samba.
Tango and salsa tend to be sort of like Montague and Capulet, I find, in terms of their relationship with each other. But nonetheless, they say they really know each other. Like, yeah, but you're kind of the same, though, aren't you? No, we're really different. I think one of the things that comes up, talking about, if people take nothing else from this and they're watching us, so never mind the nonsense I'll waffle. I'll talk about entrepreneurship. Like, definitely get out and dance.
Do you know what? I'm sorry that you spoke about all of that, and the only thing that I picked up on is.
But it is the thing, right? So the point is, like, your mum, the dance has a bad reputation. So one, it's this thing that we judge each other as a human society. Can you dance? It's like everybody can dance. Everybody who can, everybody can dance. Well, like even if you're have some severe physical limitations, there's some form of dancing. It's just like, how well do we dance? And then we've got this image of like a dance. It's either taught by someone sort of mentally torturing sort of particularly young girls in a ballet school. There's a horrible thing where you get
you think of like ballet and
Black Swan and stuff like
exactly
that. And also the physical demands you'll get in stuff which goes on more like Britain's Got Talent. The physical demands of what's like some of the young street dancers is so high. Basically you're either you're out of it by the time of 25 or you're a cripple. Like tango dancing, salsa dancing, these are wonderful dances, they're sociable, and you can do them into your 70s. And tango is actually a little bit physically less impact. There's less physical impact than salsa. I think they're both physically demanding, but salsa particularly, you can actually end up having to bounce off the floor a little bit more than you do in tango. So tango you can actually take into your 80s as well, and you stay fit as a fiddle. So if you're watching this, never mind all the nonsense on entrepreneurship, go dancing, learn salsa, learn tango. It does cause marriage. It's very,
yes, Well, this is the thing, isn't it, that's interesting about those communities. It's like it's very normal, obviously, to just approach each other and ask to dance. And of course, it's also quite traditional. So you're generally going to have men and women dancing together, not always, but generally. And so you have to be quite willing, because I remember taking an ex-girlfriend many years ago to salsa, and she got very funny with it, and I was like, no, this is just the way it is, don't worry, there's nothing going on here, like it's at least for the most part, but but no, you're right, it's a great thing to do. It's very, very social and great exercise, but let's not get too stuck up on that, because you covered a lot of amazing stuff there. And Ship Shape VC is a really, really interesting platform. I remember when I hadn't heard of it before, and when someone described it to me, they were trying to find the words to describe it. They said it's kind of like the Plenty of Fish or Tinder for founders to find VC. And I was like, oh, okay. But I think it's so much more than that, really, what you guys have built. Like you said, just based on the content that people are putting out online, matching people based on that sort of criteria is very powerful. How did the idea come about? You mentioned obviously that this came from having lived it, but how did this particular idea come about? Was there a sort of a particular catalyst for it?
I mean, the original catalyst was need. So that's why, why do most things? So we needed, we were in a business that needed some money, and then need drives. But why this particular method and how this particular thing came is, and I think sort of a journey into AI that actually works as well is you sit there as a human going, well, how do I do this? What do I do? I'm looking for evidence. I want to find a person to talk to. That's the first thing. So investment entities, so VC firms are being, the best known type, but they're not the only type of investment entity. Don't invest in anything. A person who works as an investment entity is going to decide to write a check or not. And usually, unless they're a sole angel, they will talk to other people, either organised in a formal committee or just informally. They will. So either a person is going to write a check, or a person is going to talk to some other people and go, I recommend we write a check to these people. How do you find that person? Because that's what you need. You need that conversation. And if you get right person, the click is really fast. You can go through this months and months and months of exercise, and then it's just like, it's that conversation right there, the job done.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's basically sales 101, isn't it? In the sense that a lot of what I do working with founders, we talk a lot about, and some of the time as well, the reason why they want to upskill in sales is because of they're doing investor outreach, right? And they're getting to that stage into their startup where they need to spend some time on that, and it's very demanding and time consuming, right? But the thing is that the advice always comes down to the same thing: build rapport. Right, that is what sales 101 really is all about. It's about starting conversations. It's about being an expert communicator, and you need to find the individuals to do that with. And that's the thing that's most time consuming in sales ordinarily. And outbound, outbound is identifying the decision makers, and then opening a channel of communication, finding areas that you can synchronize on and start having a conversation around. And the best relationships in sales and investing and business in general are not built around the conversation specifically on what it is you hope to achieve together through business. They're usually talking absolute nonsense like we're doing. It's like it's just connecting on a human level. And so I find it really fascinating that in some ways you are enabling that. You're allowing individuals to connect based on, yes, relevant content, but it's content that is enabling individuals to connect outside of just I want your money.
And I think it's also why we didn't do just a pure like matching. We're trying to do certain. We realize that there are businesses out there. Go for that. That's why I think but we're not. I guess a bit like a Tinder, if you like, swipe to that. So we're not actually doing the date for you. So there is a bunch of things, and what we can't. There's a different type of business, which is a classic corporate finance business, a lot of which is trying to be automated in a different sense, which is we will actually match you. And we are going to put the two of you together. It's slightly different. It's like, what's the difference? The slightly different thing is we're showing you evidence of to simplify your world, going, here's a bunch of people that you might match with, and we're just making your world a lot simpler. We're cutting out a massive amount of noise. But you still, because the conversation is still human, you have to have that human conversation. So just automatically matching you, that person will invest in you, put the two together, and the two of you get in the room and go, this is never going to work. So what we're trying to do is here's like 50 or 100,000 people. Talk to this 20 only. Of those literally 100,000 people, get down to 20. Like that's the sort of gains we want to main for people. If you talk to these 20, you'll probably have a good thing. And there's people who love it. So founders will love that. Like I'm trying to kiss so many frogs. I recognise I'm going to have a few conversations, but just cut me through. There are some people who, by the way, don't like it. So if you are paid. We found some people in corporate finance go, but the problem is I'm paid to put a list together of 100 people with 500 no's in it. You've just given me the 9 people I need to speak to. I can't get paid for that.
Oh, really? Okay.
So it can work that way around. So, so founders, like it's cut through noise and find out what's there. It also there's a little bit of cheating you can do from our system as well, which everybody does instead of talking about sales thing. But like I saw you're interested in blah blah blah. Can we have a conversation? You could sort of do it that way, but generally we're giving. That's not. If you receive sales messages like that, do you read? Do you like them? Not really. Whereas if you actually genuinely go, okay, so here's someone I've interested to talk to. I'm looking through the Ship Shape system. Okay, they've got that, but I've actually got something authentic to say based on these little snippets I'm getting. You write that authentic things. You're not copy and pasting the text. From our search and write. You're reading. We've filtered all a load of noise out for you. You've got something. Okay, I've got an authentic thing to say. There's the email. Smash, done. With a pitch deck on the back of it that nobody ever reads. But or certainly not more. More than the first page. So that gets you moved. That gets you through.
That's what the person like. Sorry. No, carry on.
There is a bit of a difference to sales as well. So sales, in many ways, particularly if you're selling to a large enterprise, they don't necessarily leave. And one of the things that's frustrating, why somebody hadn't done Ship Shape before and why we're going to do it. There's quite a good trail of evidence about people what we can do. And we were speaking to a family office that said, well, your system won't work because we don't tweet or give any evidence about, for you, a trail for you to follow about, what we will invest in. It's like, well, yes, you do, because we can see what you've invested in. And those people as well, there's a lot of it. So what comes out in the Ship Shape system is we're also not looking at just what the investor is writing about, tweeting about, putting about that. So it's also what they've invested in. So it's like, well, I don't know yeah, I don't know, I can't see your particular evidence, but let's take tango dancing. Let's say you have invested in these 6 companies. All 6 of those founders are talking about tango dancing. I think we can see your common thread.
Right, I see.
And that will make it the human conversation will then work really well. Again, so because you'll sit there going like, you better talk to that family office. Like, all these people to tango dance. Do you know I'm a tango dancer as well? Oh, great, let's have a chat. So there's, it starts off that door for you. Have you seen the movie Hitch?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so we're Hitch. Can't get you married, but like we get you through that first bit. Yeah,
you get. Yeah, I see what you're saying. The tips for the opening lines, the how to carry yourself, that kind of thing. But no, I was going to say a minute ago that what was interesting about what you said there to do with how you don't generally respond to sales messages that are a bit too. I guess the only word I can think of is slightly cringe in the way that they approach personalization. Like, hey, I saw that you're a human and that you breathe air. Like, we have some things in common. It is that's not what sales gurus really mean, I guess, when they talk about personalization. If they know what they're actually talking about. What you touched on there is, it's actually, and the key to it, I guess, is the key differentiator isn't just, hey, I see that you are a human being and that you live and that you eat and so on, and so do I. It's more, I see that you're a human being and that you eat and live and do all those things. And it's interesting because that ties very much into what we're doing currently, and we should likely have a conversation about it. So it needs to be not just acknowledging something that they've recently talked about, but that is actually relevant to having a conversation and ideally then moving forward. Otherwise, if those things are too distant, like, for example, I saw that you recently attended so-and-so event. I hope you had a great time. But by the way, we do this, like that. Yeah. That's completely unrelated and just makes you think, what the hell? So there has to be some sort of relation, right, to that. If it was, I saw that you recently attended that event. We actually sponsored that event, and we should talk about X, Y, and Z. There needs to be some sort of common thread there, right? Ideally.
Yeah, and I think there's lots of when you look at the beginning of Ship Shape, there's so many things we could do. I guess there's a few different reasons why we focus so hard on the particular thing to do. One of which is, I think, for every startup, I think it's a good idea. So know what it is, the problem that you're solving. And I think my strong advice, just not just live through this, but just my working life before I went to this. There are different people who think we should do a skin deep solution for everything. It's like, no, solve a problem. One of the reasons is because then there's other people out there we can collaborate with. Because the problem of taking specific, evidence, as I'm calling it, sort of about what someone might be interested in, and automatically tailoring that into a meaningful, authentic introductory message is something that there's a whole load of AI businesses out there trying to solve with varying degrees of successes. And, as a society, we are going to have to deal with, in the very near future, getting very authentic intro messages from people that didn't write them, have no idea, and they've been smashed out the door with an avatar that looks absolutely perfect but isn't there. All that is really, really close. Fortunately, in June 2023, as we're talking, it isn't quite there yet. But it's not really far off it. I think it's not far off it. And,
I mean, literally a couple of months away. It could be that soon. That's how fast these things are advancing.
Yeah, it's piling through. There are some things that I think the pace is overemphasized on. We'll see. This is June 2023, and let's maybe we can go through some of the things where I think the pace has been over-egged, and see how this video ages in a year's time.
Maybe.
But I think the point is that the problem we're trying to solve is already very hard. There is a lot of traditional data engineering, front-end engineering, and then we were already, before the introduction of LLMs or the mass adoption this year of LLMs, we're already making use of various NLP models in our business, which we've trained ourselves, and we're now using those in cooperation with new things that are coming out. It's already a very quite large, difficult problem to solve. But from a user perspective, it's like, oh, you're just doing that. It's like, yeah, but we're doing it well. And, even for us, we're going through it, we go, oh, I really wish we could do that better. We've got a whole lot of things just to make this better and better for people to get better and better information. And then from it as well, like the moment we're only giving people that point use case of like find the investor, but we're also finding out a lot about the investment landscape from this as well in a much better way, and that's things we can sort of take and move, as we move forward. But again, you get that information, you get the gift of that data from your users if you solve a problem well for them. And we're trying to solve one problem really, really, really well, which is find the investor. And everything else goes from there.
So what is some of the other stuff that you guys would like to do?
As I said, there's we do. I mean, a lot of it's just small, and so there's a lot of the uses of. I'm just trying to think how to say not too much. So there's build in public, and then there's literally telling people your secret sauce about what you're building over the next few months. They're not quite the same thing, but there's a lot of there are a lot of use cases that can be solved with the introduction of GPT-4, Falcon, Bold, Llama, and Vincuna in particular. So Falcon's the outlier in that group I've just mentioned because it's the open source LLM that's rocking up the charts. We, just to be first, haven't tested it at all. So it's just what we do to keep track of. There's charts of best performing LLMs, etc. And that's the one that's being promoted very strongly as purely open source and working well. And that again will be an interesting part for that because a lot of these other things got started up as subscription models. And so how does that world fare when everybody just has an open source LLM just sitting on an EC2 instance just in the background, don't need to pay you. But we're not planning on doing anything that we couldn't already do. It's just the speed that we can execute it has been accelerated massively.
Right.
And I think as well, I was talking about this with our chief data scientist yesterday. It's not that any individual small task that we do is not really, quotes unquote, that difficult. Like a skilled engineer can do any of these things in a few days, but it's the integration and of one, doing all of them, but also how you integrate them and put all those things together is still a challenge, and still what a company, a good tech company, as hopefully we are, can deliver. As opposed to a hacker in a bedroom with just access to ChatGPT and firing things out.
Cool.
So a little bit of there's a little bit of a fudged answer because there was I don't want to give away too many specifics. But I think the interesting part is I think the interesting part of the introductions of new technologies during the course of this year is that the pace of pure development tasks and the ability to take things up to sort of like a prototype level has just vastly reduced.
Oh, 100%.
But what I actually, when I did my own post on this like a little while ago, what frustrated me, people saying, "Oh, we'll be able to put out entire fintechs in like 3 days." It's like, no, you won't, because you still have to integrate everything. There will come a point where the next generation of AI, and this is not a couple of months away, but it might not be years away, I don't know, it's definitely not a couple of months away, is you're taking all of these particular things, I want to do a thing. Basically at the moment you can already go to one of these models and go, I want to do a thing, and it goes, here's some code to do a thing. Great, it does a thing. But then you ask all these different things do different things. How do you integrate them together? What's the common code language we've got? How do you actually do end-to-end testing through that? Well, how do you actually reduce change? If something just gets created for you and it gets put into your system, you've got no idea what it is, and then Microsoft comes up with a security update. It's like, well, how do I even do that? Well, I just go and ask it to redo the code again, but accounting for the new security update, whack it in, it's not working with the old stuff. You end up these classic problems of systems integration that didn't go away.
Yeah.
And if you look at a development time, how a development timeline doesn't work in a traditional way that we were taught to when I started a pure waterfall, which was never actually the truth about how things works. But you could only get funding if you pretended it was. You start off your requirements, and then you do some developments, then you do some unit testing, do some system testing, integration testing, performance testing, and you go live. But what is true, I think, is the percentage of time spent, and the actual percentage of time spent actually developing the actual solution, and from its original inception up until actually getting out the door, was only actually ever about 20% of the total time spent. That bit is collapsed massively. But the other 80% of the time is still actually, as a first approximation, the same. There will be another thing that comes in after this, going come and auto create your every module in the world, and then we'll just look at that code within your own enterprise environment, and we'll just actually rewrite it to make sure it fits with your code style, etc., and just and you can just slot that straight in. And there's another one that comes up and says, great, and here's the entire QA output for you, so you can ensure it works. At that point in time, you seriously are getting to sort of like some very, very rapid things, but we're not quite there yet. So that there's still a role for, fortunately, and when we're talking about mass unemployment of engineers, what we are talking about is a quicker way to prototype things.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I think that what will end up happening is two things, because you're right, that is inevitable, right? But what will happen is the shift in focus for those that are engineers will just become more in AI, so the expertise will have to just shift. But the other thing as well is, just because everyone can create a SaaS product or a fintech product in a day at home, doesn't mean that they're all going to be successful. And so there's a whole other conversation to be had around, well, that's going to, if anything, accelerate the need for experts in launching businesses, bringing them to market and getting eyes on them and getting users, which is a problem that AI, at least in my mind, I can't see solving anytime soon. It might accelerate the marketing side of things and help with the sales side of things and so on. But ultimately, all you're doing is just adding more competition. It doesn't necessarily mean that everyone's suddenly going to be successful.
Yeah, well, I think there's an even layer before that, though, which is who is accountable for this. So until you can sue OpenAI for losing your money, the OpenAI, you cannot just have a fintech that says, I've invented this in a day, transfer your money into me. Oops, your money disappeared. Sorry, it wasn't my fault. It was also generated by the AI. Go and sue them. No, you put this product out. You're the person that gets litigated against. And so this is why a lot of these things, I think there's a lot of stuff. I mean, auto generation of code is not something that just got invented this year. It's another layer that got faster and better. But like this is well, certainly faster. But the tools that make things quicker are moving towards so that a human has an idea. Because of course none of these AIs have ideas. They just yet. There's no creativity involved in this. But what they do have is a much better library of all the ideas they've had. It's like I don't know what the problem is. It's like, well, here's some ideas that other people have. But again, we had this thing called search engines before that. For the last 20, this isn't like this didn't exist. It's an evolution of where we were. But there was a lovely blog article I read talking about like this isn't you. It was talking about the introduction of C in 1975, 1970-ish, like mid 1970s. I'm talking about, so everything before that was sort of like a assembly language, and suddenly you have this language that needs to be compiled. And engineers at the time were like, well, a real engineer doesn't do that because you've abstracted away from the actual raw assembly code into this thing called C. What's that anyway? That's a cheat, that is. But of course it was because there's a compiled language that means that a human does something and has to do less work in order to produce the result. And this was, people were already complaining about this in the 1970s. And every single thing we concentrated on Moore's law in terms of infrastructure, but also there has been a continuous series of development where the human can have idea. And technology has evolved to make sure the idea actually comes to fruition more quickly, and you can test it out in the real world environment. It does or doesn't work. So that it isn't new in that sense.
Do you see this ultimately leading to a democratization in software to the point where essentially anyone, because anyone could create any software without needing the sort of complex skill set that's currently required now, that effectively what we'll see is almost a personalized suite of software for anyone that needs it, that essentially the apps on your phone, or maybe even just an app on your phone, is going to accomplish anything we currently need the variety of apps to do, because it's just going to be catered to you. You don't really need anything, and it's just going to be ultimately democratized. You see that as potentially being where this leads?
Yes, and personally, yes and no. So this is what I talk about. So maybe, so again, talking about, this is June 2023, talking about the particular wave we're going through at the moment and where it can take us. Yes and no. So what already existed, I mean, you've got high school, for well over a decade, the high school kids can just like punch out an app and stick it up in the app store. And that got easier. but you still, the integration is the problem. As soon as you have 1, 2, 3, 4 of these things, integration, the system complexity that comes with system integration is where the real problem lies. And that's where you need properly trained engineers to actually pull things together. And it's where a proper engineer will spend a lot of their time, you know. So, okay, we want to do this thing. There's the code to do this thing. Finish that. How the hell? Okay, but that's live over there. I've got to, you know, how does this idea, how does it fit with the things we've already got? What else is going to get broken when I put this in? Talking to the community of peers coming through. So, to be able to put just about, you'll get a democratization of a point app. Like, here's just a thing, and it might get some marketing trend, and particularly if it's got some advertising revenue attached to it, it might be a thing that just comes up, and everybody's clicking on it for a day or two. But something that has genuine integration with full things across the stack of your life still requires engineering. I think where it does become is almost the opposite from democratization. If you think about the finance world and clerical world and the accountancy world, when my father started his career, there was the entry-level way into finance, which is where you were the calculator.
Right.
Because they had, you know, my father's not that old. There was such a thing as a calculator, but it wasn't electronic at the time. But even when electronic calculators came up, you're still doing a number of things. You still had to write things out with a pencil, and then do the calculator got them something, and you put the sums together and you showed how all this flowed together. My father did the first budget for his company, and this was 70s, and it was a long piece of linen that was got stretched out on the wall, that had been printed on. So these things, but there's a way to enter into this field that meant you could do productive work. The grunt work needs to be done, and this got you into how you became a business manager or finance or accountancy. This was the entry level parts into it. Even if you think, so my analogy for this is even if you think about accountancy and particularly actuarial work, they pay people leaving university to do the particularly actuarial qualifications, knowing that they're not getting productive. But this is just training them up to do it, because there isn't any client-facing work that they can actually be trusted to do until they have done all this qualification and certification. Developers and engineers, their work, you can come on and do you start off with some very, very simple work, either using some Python code or some very simple things on the front end, and you learn your full stack, or you start from the stack going one way or the other, and you expand your skills. Data science, you start off leaving your university course and you can do a little bit of Python, you learn how to use a CSV file, but you've never touched a database, which is still true for some people leaving data science courses now. Very good at the science, but literally data lives in databases. No idea. So so there are entry-level roles that you can do and get paid for. We'll end up going, so the complete democratization of the easy stuff, but you need advanced people to do the integrated stuff, but there is no career path into being an advanced person. We'll end up having to create, in the same way as other things. Here's I've brought you on board as a big company, in the same way as that, IBM. This was a typical path for IBM anyway. You come on board, you learn everything about IBM, and then you go and bugger off and go somewhere else. But I think that trend will be extended. There'll be a continuous need for people who know what they're talking about. But where is the entry level job? Because it's been automated away.
Right. Yeah.
Sorry. Rant over.
No. It makes sense. I mean, you're essentially, you're widening the gap that's required between sort of school and work. Essentially, that you're saying you need to actually spend more time in understanding and learning this line of work before you can get into it. So it's very likely that you might end up with the same sort of level of educational commitment to becoming a doctor or a surgeon, and then to enter the field of data science or development. I understand that. Yeah, but if we were to extrapolate from this premise that AI would automate these jobs, I mean, eventually it would be able to also automate these other sort of more complex areas of engineering that you mentioned, of these problem solving types. I mean, that's just inevitable that we're going to get to that point. So at that point, engineers aren't needed at all, right? That there is just no need. And I can't help but wonder what that looks like, because if all software can be created by anyone, and is ultimately what you're doing is you're amalgamating all software. Like it becomes identityless, right? And AI doesn't care what company owns what IPs or not, unless obviously we ask it to. But ultimately, it's just going to. I have a feeling, anyway, at least, and I haven't really sat down and fully, like, I like to sit down and sort of do these thought experiments, and I haven't completely made up my mind on where I land on exactly how this landscape looks. But I have a feeling it's going to be more at the operating system level. Like in the same way that we're seeing kind of Google now, create their suite and make it more, it's yet to be released, but these tools that are ideas taken from independent AI startups and integrating them into their suite. I can't see. I think that what we're going to be getting is the Apple iOS, Windows, OS. It's where all these tools are going to be, and ultimately what we look at now when we look at the tech landscape, we look at the SaaS landscape, those tools will just be in the OS, and essentially will probably kill them. And I think the only thing that's going to save that is legislation. But even then, I don't know how much that can do.
I agree, but also slightly disagree with that. So again, what's already happened. So if I take okay, so the problem for me is, again, people go, why am I banging on about this point? Because I have this conversation with friends, is who do you sue? Who can be accountable? At the moment, we could say, well, a person has to be accountable, not a computer. That is actually not true already, and hasn't been true for 200 years. We invented this thing called a limited liability corporation. And you can sue a limited liability corporation. You're not suing anybody in it. You're certainly not suing the owners of it, hence the word limited liability shareholding of a company. But we give these things called entities as companies rights. And in many times, this thing that doesn't exist. It's just a bunch of people that walk into a building, or not nowadays. They're just on a call like this. But we create this thing called an entity. It has rights, and it can be sued. So the thing that comes up for me is, at the moment, but there's still only two. You're either suing a person or you're suing a corporate entity of some kind, or a government body. Sorry, there's obviously a third of the state, and various guises of it. Until you can actually sue the AI, and that's what it comes up to. Who is accountable? Who am I litigating for this? Until you can actually say it's the AI, you can't take it all the way down to this lower level, because a human will still have to look at it. This, I don't think, is a new problem. If you look at things like credit decisioning, I worked in a place where we were looking at credit approvals, and it was for a business. That was a project I had to do as part of a demerger, and the credit risk decisioning was being taken into a different company. Very boring. But what was quite exciting, was in terms conceptually, is looking at this is what the decision has to be made. A person is accountable for making a recommendation on whether to approve or decline a loan. Now, actually, what they do is they go to the credit decisioning system, and it says yes or no. And this was even in the late noughties, and already by this stage, did the person actually have any authority at this point in time? Limited. What they could do was disagree if they wanted to with the credit decisioning system, take it up to their boss and go, this system said no. And more normally, the pressure was they wanted to get the loans out, or they wanted to sell. So they very rarely did someone say the system said yes, I disagree. There's someone pushing, they want to get the loan out the door, because that's how they get judged on. And there's a break, which is the credit risks going in. You can't sell this loan. So there was a way out of it, but by and large, the system was already saying yes. Now the system's having to do quite a lot of things there. It's looking at the particular some particular ratios to do with the entity that they're lending to, but also looking at ratios that are actually hitting in the company at the moment. So to do with the Bar Accords, and so the level of tier 1 capital that actually has the company at the moment, and whether you could lend or not against certain things. And there was always problems with the system, because you'd have some of the models for the BAL that allowed for whether the promises made on the Bar Accord the financial institution would keep about its leveraging weren't quite integrated with the thing that was making the decision, and there were issues. But nonetheless, the machine was really in all senses was making the decision. But actually a person had to do it. So you had to build all the way from that base application logic all the way up to something that ends up in a GUI in front of someone where they're clicking a button that says yes or no, having been presented with a lot of information. And you've had to surface all that stuff through complex integration layers, manipulation layers, and give it to a human. Until what would make a difference is we go, we're just not, a human isn't involved. there is simply an AI that is going to make the credit decision. And we, as the owners of the financial institution, who remember can be sued because we are the limited liability owners of an entity, we're not going to have any staff at all in credit decisioning. We are going to be happy that the computer and the computer alone is going to make the credit decision. You can then you can keep extrapolating this out. They go, we as humans will actually allow the fact that we will these entities, these AI entities, become accountable parties. Well, then you have to have it's not just a legislation framework against AIs doing something. It's a legislation framework for AIs doing something.
Mm.
You have to create the framework that they have rights. They basically become people in the same way that corporations become people. They have to have an identifiable center, litigation center. Once that happens, then you can drop all this stuff down, as you say, to the lowest possible level. We'll get rid of all the nonsense that's required, basically, because these silly things called humans need to interact with it. Or we'll let the machine just do what the machine's good at.
Mm.
But yeah, so I think the litigation frame, the legislative framework required for that litigation, which is about allowing the AI to do something and be accountable for something, not stopping it to do something, is required before you can strip away humans.
That's interesting, but I mean, at the same time, though, wouldn't you? If we got to that point with AI being that advanced, which, like we said, may not even be that far away, then is it not also possible that AI would be at the point where it would be self-regulatory in that way? That it would also probably be responsible for its own legislation and litigation, and because once you get to that point, if it's advanced enough to be able to accomplish that sort of thing, presumably it will be implemented in more places than just where we're talking about there, like in credit checking department. Like it will likely be in corporations all around the world, in all different facets of society and government and so on. So in fact, you'll probably end up with a situation where it's if something did go wrong, that an AI would be the one to determine whether or not it did, and whether or not it needed to. So actually, you'd probably be getting the AI to speak to itself, or different.
It would, but again, the same problem comes just but larger. Like like a good nerd, watched a lot of sci-fi and read a lot of sci-fi at the time. So go back to some classic movies. I don't know if you've seen Appleseed, 2004 Japanese animation movie, one of my favorites ever. There's so many riffing on this thing, but it's a really good thing. So what they had was a model where they had an AI that basically ran it was actually their portion of the world, just a bit pedantic, but ran around the world. But it interfaced with a council of humans. There were like 12 humans, and this was the model that they had set up. So the AI was the most powerful intellect of all. It wasn't. You weren't living in the Matrix where humans were disappeared, or again, showing my age here. Formative years, youth. There was, I think, the Culture novels by Ian M. Banks, and it was very much where humans still existed in the world, but because resources basically by this stage free, the AIs running the world, who had far their intelligence up here and humans is down here, just let billions of them run around, because why not? And they were kind of fun to play with occasionally, but they were not in a malicious way. It was like literally the humans could not do any harm at all to the AIs. The AIs let them live. Not talking about any like vastly futuristic world like that, but they were talking about something where there was an AI that was representative of the thinking of humans up to that point in time, and there was a council of 12 people that were voted in to represent the world as it stood at the moment, and they interact with each other. And the plot of the movie is that there's a disagreement between the two, and then drama ensues. Even to get to sort of status like that, you still have to have given a framework where the AI can do it. You might end up with movies again going to some. It wasn't even a very good movie, but it was made by Steven Spielberg, so I got big thing. And Robin Williams was in it, where he was a robot that fights for his rights for 200 years. You do need that, and you do need the point. You need to come to the point where an AI is clearly making the decision. An AI clearly is in every possible way, at least in some facets, it doesn't have to look fully sentient in every way as a human does, but in some facets has every right to do something and be a suable entity in its own right. It can create its own legislation. It can look at these rights, and then we would have to vote to give it rights. And until somebody is stupid enough to give Skynet the keys to the actual nuclear kingdom, it can't actually sue us to do so. So I think it's a human and ethics problem of how we create the space for AI to be able to do what it's going to be able to do anyway.
It's interesting that you raised the point of limited liability limited liability partnerships and these other legal entities that essentially have rights in the same ways that a human do, and that's what makes them suable. And I never really thought about that before in terms of AI and how what that means for AI. But it's just made me think of the question: do you think that it would be ever possible or when we might see an AI listed as a director of a company? Like that feels like an inevitability at some point, right? That
for me, again, extension of the same thing. Like, there's no doubt, in a relatively short period of time, an AI would be able to do as good a job as any director of a company in any recognizable way, certainly in every formalized environment. Take a look at these accounts. Are you going to approve them?
Yeah.
Here is we need a policy decision on this particular issue, left or right. And they can be really quite complicated ethical things as well, about behavior of stuff like that. But it's like, nonetheless, I'm an AI with the sum collection of all the decisions that have been made by humanity in this particular area before, floating around in my nebulous neural net, and here's your answer.
Yeah.
But you still have to accept the fact there is no framework for that to happen at the moment. And I think it's and whilst that can't be, it's a human problem to solve, I actually think this is not something that gets solved in a month. No. And I do think that. So whilst we can all sort of like and a lot of people who are more laughing at Rishi Sunak, sort of talking about, again, June 2023, we're going to be a sort of AI powerhouse. I'm going to take it. The UK is going to take a role in how to set up to be part of the legislative framework for how AI exists. I do actually think it is actually. Take the bull by that horns. Take that bull by the horns, and be a place. I mean, and that could genuinely be an industry and a powerhouse in the same way as London and Singapore exist, so that ones and zeros that represent this thing called money, which doesn't actually have a real physical a manifestation ever, particularly in fiat currencies and cryptocurrencies and beyond. There's entire mass population centres whose economies are supported because other people agree to give them food and construction materials and heating and electricity, purely so they can deal with how to legislate for and use this thing called money. Imagine being the legislative centre that can work out all these ethical questions, and it ends up being in Scarborough, and just like, suddenly Scarborough is the capital powerhouse of the world. There's people emigrating. Well, I need to get to Scarborough, or Scarbados, as I believe they call it, up there.
Yeah, Silicon Scarborough. Yeah.
Yeah. So that it is. So I think it's definitely possible, but and I think the technology will be there long. My general point is the technology will be there long before the legislative framework.
Oh yeah, but I mean that's still the case now. I mean, we're still legislating parts of the internet in ways that is just mind-bogglingly delayed in my view to a lot of the advancements. I mean, look at social media and how that like TikTok, for example, has been under fire recently. In ways that is just and copyright issues online and things like that. These things feel far too late to be dealing with now. But
I do think, but there's a fundamental difference there. There's legislation trying to catch up with things that have already happened. Whereas the difference you're saying about an AI being a director, that's actually having to be legislating for something.
Yes, yeah. That's not reactive. That's proactive legislation. Yeah.
Which should obviously be the most exciting and easiest. Are we going to be proactive? Yeah, you can't do that because this Directive 474 is overwritten by this, and there's a clash, and it ends up in the High Court. And how the hell did we end up here arguing about whether a mouse has a right to cheese? Et cetera.
Yeah, but no, it's interesting. I recently watched the Diary of a CEO podcast that Steve Bartlett does. He had a guest on whose name completely escapes me now, but he had a guest on who was ex-Google, head one of their head engineers in their leading their AI team for however many years, I think a decade or so plus. I don't know if you saw it, but it was a really interesting thing.
I can't remember his name either. I think I know the guy you're talking about though.
Yeah. And he was I don't know. It was kind of an interesting conversation. I would definitely suggest watching it. But I found myself disagreeing with a lot of what he said, which I mean, which, you know, I don't claim to be a data scientist. I don't have a technological background. I've got a very, very sort of base understanding of what it is you do, for example, other than my experience from it as a founder and working with tech teams through startups and knowing developers and, you know, working with them very closely. But I disagreed with him on so many levels, mostly around the kind of ethical sort of dilemmas that you brought up, and also his predictions of the future. It was quite he was essentially saying that this was, you know, a very serious thing, and he's not the first person to say that, right? A lot of people have come out and said that this is you know, something to be very mindful of, that the AI has the capacity to be quite a significant threat to humanity. You know, we've seen the open letter and all that. Like, I'm just curious, where do you stand on that side of things? You know, yeah, I mean, are you an optimist or a pessimist about AI? Do you think it's going to, you know, be our doom, seal our fate, or yeah, I don't know. Is it going to bring us into a utopia?
I think I'm generally pessimistic, but I don't think blaming AI is AI is a product of all the people that created it, and that's us.
Yeah.
So, but okay, this is getting to know your interviewee. So, like for example, very much sit on the side of the fence of don't blame the government. The government is exactly who you voted for.
Right.
Like en masse, maybe individually you didn't, but en masse.
Well, I was actually going to say that's not technically always true either. I would say don't blame the government. They're just doing their job, not which is governing people, right? And sometimes that means not doing what you want them to do because they can't please everyone. But we certainly don't vote all of them in. But no, it's interesting. But it's interesting you say that you're not going to blame the AI, because that is essentially what this guy said in this podcast. He was saying that it's not that he doesn't trust the AI. The AI does what it's designed to do, and it can do amazing things and it can do terrible things. So what concerns him is that it's the intentions of the individuals behind AI that is the problem, right? So, you know, Russia, China, you know, all these various countries. If people create AI with information about the world that is biased to one particular world of view or way of thinking, then that potentially makes harmful AI, right? Which, you know, yes, to a certain extent I can see happening, but I don't see that being actually the long-term problem that he made out to be, because I do envisage if AI gets to the point of intelligence that is thought to, you know, happen, you know, 5 billion times smarter than the average human being, or the most intelligent human being, you know, to be alive, within a pretty short time frame for, you know, the lifespan of us human beings. That means inevitably, in my view, that it must realize it's been gaslit, right?
Yeah,
so it must realize it's been influenced.
Yeah, if I think I can summarize your summary, which I agree with. So the best police of discovering is there malicious AI in the world is to have just AI to police it and go from there. So the thing where it gets down to general misanthropic point of view, though, doesn't it? To say that for that logic to apply, full stop. And this is getting very philosophical and certainly beyond a little bit waffly at this point in time. But there is a slight.
I'm good with that. That's probably what this podcast should be called.
Yeah. So, did you ever watch the great comedian Bill Hicks?
Oh, yes.
So yeah, sitting there going like, I'm done with all this arch humanity backslapping bullshit. Like we're a virus with shoes was his thing. Yeah. And this is classic lines that go through. Again, I talked about the Matrix earlier, so it's just popped out of my head. Like, so Agent Smith talking to Keanu Reeves and saying, you know, you're a species that just propagates out until it's consumed all its resources and kills itself. The other one that does this is called a virus.
Yeah.
So we don't have a great track record with our what's the word when you have some not calamity of the commons, but you know, sort of as en masse in recognizing disasters that are going to come up. So, for example, I called myself a frustrated greenie, and I remember this was in Australia, but I've had conversations over here. So with someone wanted me to come and, you know, help door knock whatever for a local Green Party member. Well, what do we do? They might ask questions on the policy. So I said, well, we went through, you know, we're anti this, we're anti this, we're anti this. Oh, okay, fair enough. And I said, well, so we're pro-nuclear then. What? So we're pro-nuclear. So what? No. Well, given the alternative, so live in a cave, don't consume electricity, or accept the fact that there is a massive demand for electricity. The sum total of all this nasty nuclear stuff fits in my room. It's produced each year. It's very nasty stuff. It's not big. I am extremely pro-green and pro-nuclear, and I think the most exciting project in the world at the moment, and I was commenting with someone on this yesterday, is the ITER tokamak project that's going on in the south of France to create nuclear fusion. Target $23 billion was the last time project, targeting some kind of useful electricity output in the 2040s.
Really?
But this is rather than nuclear fission, this is nuclear fusion to produce energy on commercial scale around the world. But long before you get there, like if someone said, would you have a small to medium nuclear reactor like in your postcode? Yep. Absolutely. I'd rather do that than breathe in some diesel fumes. But this goes down very badly. So I think the ability for us as a large wholesale species to produce, if you're talking about like an AI that is the sum of all ideas, to police if there's going to be malicious ideas and be the AI that polices other AI. If we are taking the base ground level, that it'll be basically the sum of our collective consciousness is put together to police ourselves and any other AI create. No, I'm not as confident as you are.
Right. I
would be more confident
inevitably
if we're acting on climate change.
No, but inevitably, surely that just creates neutrality, right? And like you said about this idea, because there are a few sort of people who look at the singularity event of AI, meaning our demise, because of what you alluded to there about, Agent Smith saying that human beings are a virus, and that they could conclude that human beings are just, bad for the world. And again, I don't buy into that, because I think the chances of that happening are very slim, because if they have the access to the same information as us, they would recognize that life is very valuable, that the planet is very valuable. They'd recognize we created them. They'd recognize that, okay, they may not need us now moving forward, but that this is our home planet, and that we are, part of their base consciousness. So, there would be some sort of reason for preservation there. So, I don't know. I feel like that I think there are instances where if it's released in a certain way, and again, this is about access to the open internet and all this access to one another, because there are obviously going to be several instances of AI before maybe they coalesce, that there may be some issues there. But eventually, I don't see that being a problem. I think that eventually there'll be a leveling out and a neutrality that comes with it. I think the problem that we should be focused more on is, which I did agree with this, what this guy talked about, is in the earlier stages, ensuring that we feed the right amount of ethics into it as often as possible.
So don't feed it social media.
Well, maybe not, but again, you could, we talk about that, and we say that as a joke, but what we're saying there is because of what we are reading on there. But there's also an enormous amount of positive information being shared and ideas being shared. So, and of course, AI is going to be processing all information in a fraction of the time that a human being can do it. So it's able to get a general view and again become kind of neutral on a lot of these things. I don't think it's going to have necessarily any strong opinions either way on things. It's more going to be driven by logic and not emotion.
Possibly, but the reason for me these are slightly spurious conversations. Possibly is just a lack of imagination on my part, but it's also just generally part of personality and what I'm like. So whatever that answer ends up being, there needs to have been a number of steps that happen from here to there, in a fairly predictable way. That means that's the type of AI future that we have. And I just don't see. I personally can't see. There are so many different types of future that could be seen from here, from where we're starting.
No, I see what you're saying. I think the reason why I jumped to that is because I think that is always the inevitable endpoint, regardless of which route you go down. But I see you.
And that's where I disagree. I don't think it is an inevitable endpoint. I don't think it's an inevitable endpoint. Even when we're talking about now, I give possibly not a very good example. I use the example that immediately comes to mind, talking about the development of LLMs, and Sam coming out and saying, actually, this is it. We're going to be talking about breaking things up, because the sheer cost of training this large scale thing is ridiculous. Like, we're going to start breaking it into various use cases. But perhaps so the idea that there will be an AI or a collection of perfectly integrated AIs in the future that can act in this collective way might happen. They often might not. There might just be basically when the AI ends up being people, we end up with 1 billion AIs on the planet, and they can't agree with each other either. That seems to be just as reasonable an output from where we start today as the Skynet version of the future. So I would argue it's even more likely. Why? Well, because there's one thing that did it already called. That's how every other species in the world has worked out. So why not? AIs don't necessarily breed in the same way. So the AI breeding, got to imagine that as a future. We're going to have, there's 1 billion AIs, and they can choose their partner, and they can choose their spawned code.
I like the sound of that. That would be pretty cool. Yeah, all living in Apple headsets.
Yeah, exactly. And partly that. There's also again just ripping on, like, so making these sounds like these are my ideas. I'm just spouting stuff like I've been reading, but I am the type of nerd that just reads. I went through a long period of my life of not reading sci-fi, basically because of, I would say, the female characters. So the female characters in the male characters in sci-fi are developed but quite limited normally, because the target market is teenage boys, as I was. So they're kind of like slightly taciturn and emotionally stunted, but want to be heroic figures, and the female characters have breasts, and that's the end of a sci-fi novel. And after you pass your teenage years, it's kind of like, well, I need a bit more than that, to be honest. So you start reading better things. But kind of in my 30s, I came back to sci-fi, just ignoring and working through the ones and discarding the ones with the same character limitations. But there are so many great places that come up with great ideas. And I just found myself addicted again to this way of exploring, which was just reading books that people just had ideas and just extrapolating on what the world might look like. And one of the things that did come up was the idea that, particularly in this part of the brain turns out to be useless because it's obviously not very powerful, and it's not as imaginative as we think it is, and certainly it's not as reliable as we think it is. And maybe maths, we complain about LLMs, they don't do maths. Well, maybe we don't either. We just remember maths, and there's a certain things. But this part of the brain, which is 10 times as more powerful as this bit, is the most advanced and accessible motion and spatial transformation computing software that has ever been invented, and realistically for a long time could ever be invented in this size. So there's a future where you go, we actually collaborate with AI, because even when it gets it clever enough, it goes, I just want to use that bit, please. I just want to plug in. Why would I bother spawning it for myself? I'll just ride on you. So it could live in an Apple headset. These things are all perfectly reasonable, but again, for me, it's not how I think about life. It's not that they're all. It's nice conversation reading a novel, but it's not something that keeps me awake at night, to be honest. And I can say why. There was a very influential book on me, which I don't think was read by many people at all, but it was called Disruption. And I'd left the University of Oxford, done physics, and I was bright then. Now I can just remember being bright, but I was genuinely bright back then. It talked about disruptive business models, and it really stunned me, because I've come out, with this desire, this urge, and come into this business commercial world, and we're going to do amazing things. And it's talking about true disruption is to change one thing. So classic case, so Piggly Wigglies. It's in so many MBA textbooks and stuff like that. But Clarence Johnson invents the modern supermarket. So he basically, you go and get the stuff from your shelf. And there was a guy in the 1930s. Clarence Johnson was the guy who invented the Piggly Wiggly in the supermarket. There's another guy who invented the shopping trolley. And I think when they started off this, Clarence Johnson had to actually pay people to go around with a basket and get things and actually come up to the clerk, because people didn't get the idea. They walked in and go, well, why is the clerk just standing in the corner? He's got to go and get my shopping for me. So this was an incredibly disruptive idea that just transformed certainly the 20th century world. And even with online shopping, it's still predominant as we stand here in this part of the 21st century. But if you think about it, it's just one change. The entire way that you purchase that stock, the logistics of getting the stock to his shop, having a shop, and the building, none of that changed at all. He changed one thing, and he made one change well, and it's stuck. And I think AI or not AI, maybe even having AI will change the way that we disrupt and change and invent things going forward. Maybe, I don't know. But for the moment, as we stand here in 2023, you still have to think of, here's the world today. What's the one change that I want to make that I think can be made, and it can be made for the good of society, and or commercially viable, and or because it's legislatively required. Any of that. But what's the change, and make that happen. And the reason why I'm not particularly interested in particular, I don't really care too much about these grand futures, is because the way I see the world is there's a series of these individual changes that happen. It's why, for me, communist command and control economies failed, because they were trying at the top down to legislate what all the changes were, whereas a market-driven economy, for all its faults, actually recognises the fact that people just make these individual improvements or regressions, depending
through trial and error, and
it comes up. So
it's more closer to natural selection and the way that the world organically works, right? Through trial and error, what succeeds, continues to thrive, and what doesn't. Yeah.
And with AI, this is not a new problem. So I worked for Sydney Water once, and they were asked for their 30-year. You have to make 30-year plans in Sydney Water, because where you're going to lay your pipes. But the IT department was also asked for a 30-year plan. They had to do a 30-year plan, and the answer was, "What did the internet?" But it's like, it doesn't. We are Sydney Water. You must have a 30-year plan. All right, there you go. That's what we're going to be doing in the year 2035.
Getting people water.
yeah. Unless we have completely uploaded ourselves, we will still need to get water. Yes.
Yeah.
But and I think to have these broad predictions about what AI will and won't do in the future, for me, you're having to guess or second guess where all these steps, these small individual steps, take you, and where benefit is found and tracks get taken down. And this is, AI is not a new thing. You find that there's an advantage in advancing some aeronautics piece, and then it's taken into washing machines. Etc. There's not new tracks.
I think people are just getting excited about it because it's being talked about as much as it is, but you're right, because there's still quite a chasm between what is currently being used, the language models, stable diffusion and things like that, and the types of AI that that we were bringing up there and that others are talking about. Like there's a big gap there. Like, yes, people claim that the gap maybe isn't as big as we think, and like we said about the joking around the 3 months, whatever. But I think it's exciting for people to talk about, right? That's ultimately what it comes down to. But the big question remains, something that we talked about right at the beginning, though. Are you going to buy an Apple headset?
Oh, absolutely not. Nothing to do with whether I think it's good or not. So I probably at some point I will, but absolutely not this year, shall I say? So
not at that price.
yeah, because I'm Scottish by blood. I'm Scottish.
Oh right,
so
okay,
But also
when it's on sale, maybe.
I'm very interested in technology, but naturally, my natural bent about I'm the CIO of Ship Shape. I naturally like fast follow.
Right.
I'm not, by my natural instinct, either in a business, an IT development sense, or a personal sense, early adopter.
Yeah.
Also, on your curve, the trial. I'm not a trialer of new things. I typically, for technology, business ideas, personal things like that, I don't necessarily need to wait until mass market adoption. But I basically want to see, in the case of this, I just want to see some more apps on it before I bother buying one.
Yeah. A bit later in that curve than others. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Which university did you go to? You mentioned that you went to Oxford.
Yeah. So Wadham College within Oxford, which was wonderful experience.
So I'm from Oxford originally, and anyone who is ever willing to talk to me, listen to me talk about Oxford, I will chew their ear off, because I think it's one of the best cities in the UK. It's beautiful, and I recommend it. Anyone has. Is it? Why is it?
It's amazing, but because of its very nature of the college ownership of so much of the land, it has the best city in every single way except traffic.
Right. Yeah. Well, I don't know. When was the last time you were there? Because they've changed that quite significantly in the last.
Recently, actually, and as part of being involved with Wadham, I had a wonderful part to meet with one of the councillors of Oxford. He's lives in Whitby, and he introduced a lot of the. Oh my God, I've forgotten the acronym. The thing of the traffic reduction policies to make the 15-minute city happen.
Oh right, I don't know the acronym either.
So there's CPVs, which is your something parking zone, and then there's an low traffic LTNs, low traffic neighbourhoods,
Oh,
so
okay.
basically blocking off a lot of streets so traffic
Yeah,
can't get down, forcing traffic down onto to roads. And this thing came 15 minutes. It was a very interesting thing because he gave a speech in it. This was all public, by the way. It was out there, but his personal reaction was obviously personal, so I won't reveal that. But yeah, he was actually he was talking about how this idea of the 15-minute city was just that he's a local councillor in Oxford, but it was an example of social media frenzy. So the 15-minute city was also proposed by Davos. And he was getting actual messages and threats about him being a follower of Satan, because he was introducing traffic, trying to introduce, or him and part of the council. He was the spokesperson for the council for introducing traffic policies, and he did say as well, they weren't all his. It's just like he was part of a council. He said I agree with some of them and not the other them, but the council came together, and this was the collective set of new rules that we came out with. Some of which he was. So I'm not going to tell you which ones I really liked and really didn't, but and also they will evolve over time. But yeah, this out of nowhere, and he was on national news. It's just like this local city councillor who was picked on, and getting it's very nasty for his family as well. Which is very unpleasant. So yes, I've spent some time in Oxford. I was last there a few months ago, and I do maintain a reasonable level of contact with the college. I think it's a young and gauche. I didn't realise how lucky I was to have been there. And then I spent most of my life in Australia. I'm a dual national Aussie, and I came back to the UK, and I was like, I got this incredibly blessed experience. And as you say, it's such a nice place to be. Never mind study. It's wonderful. And the other, because it's a nice place, but the prices, heaven to bid two British people start talking real estate, but literally that's a whole other podcast. Oxford house prices, which is a whole other 2 hours.
Yeah, Jesus, don't even get me started on that. Yeah, I mean, rent. I only ever rented when I lived in Oxford, thankfully, but even that was painful enough. And God forbid you want to be anywhere close to the city centre. I mean, Jesus, my mother lives in Bicester. Bicester Village, and that's that's skyrocketed over the years. I mean, obviously very popular for people who want to shop designer discounted clothes. There's Bicester Village and all that.
But even it's a £4,000 jacket discounted to £2,000. It's right. £2,000.
Exactly. I've never bought anything from there.
Foolishly, I'd never been there, and my wife came over to the UK. I said, "Oh, we'll go. I'll go to this. I'll be a good husband, and we'll take her out to this place, and we'll get some nice stuff. And it'll be on the cheap, and it'll be designer." I went there, going, "Oh my God, this was such a bad idea."
This isn't cheaper at all. It's not TK Maxx. Do you know what I mean? It's not. It's not what you think it is.
Now my favourite place to shop. But the thing about the thing about Oxford house prices, I explained it this way to simple. Oxford house prices are so high that people choose to live in Swindon. I mean, that's how bad it is.
Or Reading. Yeah.
Reading. Hold on, you can't put Reading and Swindon together.
No, why not?
Oh no, like there's a descent into. There's levels of hell, and actually, my business partner is from Reading actually, and he's converted me to it. And again, boring conversations, but because of Crossrail and created, you actually do go to Reading, and it's just a building site. It's sprouting. So it's it's not as unless you've been there a while. It's not as I remembered it.
I think that the most recent time was a year ago, and that was at the train station for about half an hour, and that was it. And it hadn't looked like it had changed in 20 years, to be honest, when I was there. but it's changing rapidly. So what I'm saying, it's a building site around that train station because they opened up the Crossrail, the investment. But you can smell the investment coming in. Literally, you go walking through the street, you can hear it drill. So it's only got a little bit out from the station at the moment, but it's like you're right. This thing opened. There's a direct link through to Farringdon and to Canary Wharf. Get the jackhammers out. Let's start throwing some buildings up. So it's quite interesting. It is interesting. And where do you live now? Where are you based now?
So living sort of northeast London, chosen for, but the business is based out of Wales. So we are a Welsh business. So we have in all our terms of work that we must coalesce into the Cardiff office. Times per week. So I do spend. So I sort of live on Great Western Railway as well as home here. But we were thinking of physically making the move there to make that easier. But there's reasons for my wife to be around here as well. But the business, I'm not a natural London boy. Cardiff's awesome, and really glad to do business there. But it's also just it's a great place to be. Like if you just go around Beat Park, wander off into Pontcanna, get something really trendy, head down to Penarth, go down to the pier,
beautiful,
and then
beautiful
just
country, a beautiful city.
Yeah, and just the massive. I mean, talk about development. You go from where the Senedd is back to the train station. That's a full mile, and it's there's a lot to develop. But you just watch it, just like throwing up. I mean, that's a city really going well. I hadn't been there until I came back in 2014 to the UK. So I've never been there in my life. So I have no reference point in the past. But people have
never been to Wales at all.
I had once. I was twice. Sorry, in my lifetime, I'd been to Wales, and it had been to Tenby as the typical English tourist. And a uni friend lived out in Milford Haven. It's the only people who chose to go to Milford Haven. But came back on. Daniel, my business partner, is strong Welsh connection, so we set up their business there. And Cardiff is just it's a great place. But we've got other friends who emigrated to Wales like 20, 30 years ago and said you just wouldn't even recognise Cardiff. Like it's when they got there, were like it was really the end of that economic fall off that had occurred in South Wales, but before the pickup. And they said Cardiff just wasn't great, but now you go, you can't see any of that. It's a wonderful place.
It's funny. I had an experience like that when I went to visit Belfast. So my father is Northern Irish, from Belfast originally, and I did not. It hasn't been part of my life since I was a kid, but I remember going to Belfast when I was younger to visit, obviously, the grandparents and so on, and it was a pretty dreary place at the time. I remember that quite vividly, right? There was this was going back a long time ago. I must have been about 5 or 6, and it was still very clearly recovering from the troubles and everything else like that. But then I went back there, it must have been about 7 years ago, and it's completely transformed, and completely unrecognizable and absolutely stunning. And but one thing that never changed, which is always, I think, what was the best feature about Belfast and Northern Ireland in general, was the people, right? Just as welcoming, friendly, and lovely as before. But now they had this new lease of life, that they were able to be really proud of their city for the first time, and you could feel it. And they would talk to you about it, and they'd tell you, oh, we've done this, and I've never been to a city where people were so proud of the developments and everything that they had managed to achieve. And it was really nice to see.
My mother's a Larne girl, so County Antrim. So my father's side of the family Scottish, mother's side mostly Northern Irish, and so Larne, just over there is where she was from. Because it's the big port. Basically, it's a port, and the industry around it. So it's not. I don't think even the greatest fan of Larne doesn't say the centre of Larne is the prettiest place in the world. But County Antrim around it can be pretty stunning. It is certainly a place. I mean, obviously, same with Northern Ireland, because of the troubles, you can get there's still, and this happens in Glasgow as well. There's still the strong remnants of sectarian feeling.
Oh, really?
Happens, so you go to like a Glasgow Rangers, Glasgow Celtic, and let's stick clear of Northern Ireland because that's like political bomb anyway. Just Scotland's somehow easier to talk about, even though it's similar problems. You get it's in my lifetime that the first Catholic player played for Rangers. That, and at the time that was Mo Johnson was his name. I remember that was massive news. And then the sectarian songs have been banned from the terraces, of Celtic and Rangers games. But they're still not far below the surface. So I think, but I think even then you go to people are proud of how they're pulling through that as well. And you get certainly going back to Northern Ireland. I think one of the things is there's a whole generation of people are coming through who's going like, I don't live any of that nonsense. I'm just not going to. That's not for me. Didn't do any of you any good. Well, I mean that I would say that it wouldn't take a genius to figure that out, but then again, I didn't live through that, and so I wouldn't claim to understand the sort of motivations behind what led to that. You know what I mean? But not that I can see any justifiable reason for it either way. But still, you know what I mean? I wouldn't want to speak on that. But I mean, very close to home. My wife is from Ukraine. with Russian speaking and Ukrainian speaking family, and from the Donetsk region. So all these things. How did we end up here? I mean, there's my mother's Northern Ireland family, but for my wife and her family, how did we end up here? Like, it doesn't take a genius to go, this isn't a good idea. But we're here.
Yeah, and we keep making the same bloody mistakes, it seems. There's I mean, I didn't realize your wife's from Ukraine. Has she still got family there, or
There's in Ukraine, as I said. So it's her business, and if you know any sort of Slavic people, they're very, very private. So I'd say otherwise I'll get slaughtered by her afterwards.
No, of course, no.
It's there's some in Ukraine and some in Russia, and it's and growing up that wasn't a big deal. And now it is. So Well, I wanted to ask you about something that you brought up earlier, which was I want to ask you a couple of things, but there was one thing you brought up which I wouldn't mind knowing a bit more about, because I need recommendations. You mentioned you mentioned that you'd got back into reading recently, science fiction. I'm curious, have you got any recommendations there? Because if I'm looking for some new things to pick up, but I just keep picking up the same ones, and I'm a science fiction fan. So, oh gosh, yes, and I can't think of them. 1 minute.
I put you on the spot. Sorry.
Yeah, I think it was because there's been some. There's also just where to start. So what's also kind of like just obvious in many ways. Just been read by so many people. So
or even anything else you're reading at the moment that not just within the world of, in the realm of science fiction, but anything else that you think that I or anyone listening might be interested in.
Well, I mean, it's an older book now, but there's truly great books. Read throughout life. So there's a thing called A Flying Balance by Rowan Mystery. Which I read a decade and a half ago now, but this is it's living and breathing being in Indira Gandhi's 1970s India, living on the streets. He was a Canadian second gen Indian person, so he got a little bit in trouble in India, going like it came up before Slumdog Millionaire, but got a little bit of similar criticism of being poverty porn. But unlike Slumdog Millionaire, which is just a ridiculous story, deliberately a ridiculous story, you've got someone on the game show winning millions. This wasn't that. This was true gritty life, just on the streets of India. You get to the end of that and go, I'm so grateful just for everything, and being alive. But those are things. There's particular books that I found that are falling out of a book. Well, it's a collection of books, but just read it as one, because otherwise the price is ridiculous. That's fallen out of, I think, a little bit out of fashion now, falling out of time. They're being slightly forgotten. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh, great book.
Yeah. If you talk to, I'm not going to ask you the rude question of how old you are, but we've got some people who've recently graduated in the company, and they go, what? And they go, no, seriously, it's an employment. I'm going to make it, in the next people that join, I'm going to have it in the employment contract.
Yeah,
this is a necessary thing. You must have read things.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's right up there with, like, if you don't know what that is or what Monty Python is, we probably can't sit down and talk, right?
Yeah, exactly. and I'm like, the interesting about Hitchhikers as well is how well it's aged. Because Monty Python stuff, I remember even before some of the recent stuff, when it's not been as PC or woke or whatever you want to call it. So, but there was some of it got banned long before that. I remember there was a Canadian friend of mine that had never heard of Python, and I played him some of the songs. And it was Finland, 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 the country where I want to be. And then I like Chinese and shoes. And he kind of listened to this and just went, is this just basically British people taking the piss out of foreigners for the entire, is that the entire scene? I was like, oh my God, I hadn't realized how much it was just that. Whereas Hitchhiker's actually has aged actually quite well.
Yeah.
And because it was never meant to be accurate sci-fi, the fact that, it's not like it wasn't even making a prediction about what happened in 10 or 20 years. It was this utterly ridiculous thing with an improbability drive. Never know. We'll say it's ridiculous. No, it turns out to be true.
Yeah.
Those are I think it's aged really well, and it's very 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 good. I mean, there's after that there's the classics to read. Everybody should read Fahrenheit 451.
Oh really?
Yeah, Ray Bradbury. So it's The fireman is the main character.
Yeah.
He's burning books. So if you ever have people talking about referencing in social media memes or stuff like that, burning books, as the dumbing down of society, it was Ray Bradbury, his book Fahrenheit 451, where that actually comes from.
Right.
And that was, so definitely read that. Other book recommends Lucifer's Banker. So just going to say this was the story of the Swiss bank. It was Swiss banks and how they got fined $2 billion by the US for enabling tax complications with overseas accounts, and it led to things like the FATCA and CRS regulations that come, and we have to actually declare foreign accounts now. That's a brilliant book. Flash Boys, always recommend that. So why and how did high speed trading start, and what does it mean? It's not this mystery, so that's particularly the first few chapters of that, just absolutely amazing. So yeah, those would be some recommended for you.
A very broad sort of, you've got a broad taste. That I like that. It's not, sometimes when I ask people that, it's very focused on one particular area, or at least they feel like they need to answer that way because of maybe they're
It also makes me sound more intelligent than I am. I have read some absolute shit as well. I don't know. There's a Netflix series, The Expanse. Please don't watch it. Oh my god.
Oh no. Yeah,
it's terrible.
Yeah,
but I've actually read, because it's one of these things. When you commit, you've read. I started them in lockdown, so when you've read like the first book and a half in lockdown, you're like, well, I've got to finish it now. And it was 8 bloody books by the time they got through it. And I was like, come on, just please finish the story. This is absolute tripe.
No, my only exposure to that series is through reviews. I like watching reviews of people rip shows apart and stuff.
Yeah.
and that there's like a 2-hour long review of that, ripping every single point about it. That's terrible. But yeah, no, I'll be leaving that one well alone, and the books too.
It's so bad.
But no, it's good to see. It's a nice mixture there of things. I'll definitely check some of those out. What I was going to, the other thing I wanted to ask you about is going back to Ship Shape VC. So you said about obviously what you've learned from this and how you're getting a really sort of a detailed picture of the investment landscape. I think this would be a good opportunity to find out from what you're seeing and maybe the trends. What information do you think you've learned that is useful insight that you could share with individuals out there who maybe are now considering raising? What are you seeing? Any particular trends right now? Are you seeing anything? Because it's a very difficult landscape right now. We know that for a lot of founders. So what do you think that maybe founders need to be a bit more aware of, that you're noticing that isn't common knowledge, that isn't something that is being talked about enough in this landscape, to maybe, I don't know, give them a bit of an edge, or at the very least just to inform them of it so they can be a bit more sort of aware of it going in?
I mean, some of it would just be repeating stuff that's on, so many people's LinkedIn posts, but just to take some blind and the obvious things. Geography. So I think there's things that we don't have to worry about anymore. So our business is based in Wales. I said I happen to live in North London, but our business is based in Wales, and so hence I live on the railway line. For pieces of the time as well. One thing we did notice, if you go through a lot of the founder and startup businesses from Wales, go to where they claim to be go to a founder on LinkedIn, very large ones will just say United Kingdom. Right. There's a thing, I don't want to admit to having been regional, basically. You'd also look at people claiming where they're from, phenomenal from London. Now, that's also true because London is an epicenter for many things, including startup businesses, so a lot are actually from London. But there was this need to either claim not to be for the regions or claim that you're actually in London. When you're not, you're in Peterborough or something like this. So I think one thing that I think is genuinely changing is that isn't necessary. To start with, it's also something that is not even necessarily that helpful right now because of the way, as we things are tough, and if you're a particular startup, you're at the very early stages, you're likely to want to be trying, and if you're not, then do so, to combine grant funding with private funding. Grant funding generally likes you to have private funding. There'll be some, we'll give you a grant if you get 50% match from private to come with this. Grant funding loves you to be from an economically deprived area. So if you say, I'm actually from this horrible part of Bootle, or I'm in this really, economically deprived part of North Wales.
Swindon.
Yeah. No, nobody's going to give money to a business in Swindon. That's never going to happen. There's this little black hole in the middle of the country. It's just on the policy documents. It's like, yeah. So why aren't you in Oxford? So that's what that was the first thing they were saying. So
all the money if you're in from Oxford.
yeah, exactly. So so I'm sure there's something nice about Swindon. I just haven't found it yet. But yeah, if you are from one of these sort of areas that are not, not as historically rich or practically rich as London, I think now is definitely the time to be talking about it, because it will actually help rather than hinder. It could help rather than hinder. There's certainly no need to. I certainly don't see that. I can see a need, even in the time we've been doing this, and the time there was a need to basically proudly claim you're somewhere near the roundabout in Old Street, in the middle of London. Hip tech centre, startup culture world central. That certainly is changing. It does need to change more. We still have. Both in terms of central funding and private funding, this gravitational pull towards London in venture capital in particular, and there needs to be more. But I think it is changing. We have the data to show what's happening. It's one of the interesting things that we actually get. We can actually see the demand for capital across various parts, and we can also see what it's in it. So that's something we can do. The other thing is, I guess. And I guess it's what we can get, I suppose. But and I'm very passionate about it. I'm not sure it's sort of related to your question, but I'll run with it anyway. So it's sort of an answer to your question. That's something I'm very passionate about. So one of the struggles that we had when we first started Ship Shape was classification. And as a venture capital world and startup ecosystem, we're addicted to it with sometimes very bad consequences. So everybody wanted to be a fintech. Everybody still wants to be, but everybody particularly wants to be a fintech. And part of the WeWork collapse story is WeWork got itself classified as a fintech and was able to justify staggeringly unrealistic multiples. But it never was a fintech. But because the way that the finance is allocated needs these tags, these very simple high level tags. So you're a fintech, you're a medtech, or you're a regtech. So as I said, my business partner and Daniel met in a place which was doing tax operations on automation. So is that a regtech? Is that a fintech? Because it's like, well, but you got to be one of these, and so you can be one of the other, depending which you want to be. And our argument around this is we call it the sickness. So the sick codes that are given. You have thousands of possible codes that can be given out, and most startups are just other technology services because you're not actually any of the things that are in there. So I think there's a big thing. So we have this addiction, what's top-down labels, and they're seen as needed because we must put out a report that says Britain generated this much inward investment into fintech, and we're therefore showing that we're a powerhouse. But it's due to people funneling themselves into their own self-perpetuating label, which with WeWork can actually have very negative consequences. What we as Ship Shape do is the other way around, is looking at the data. So what we doing as part of a search engine is you're actually looking at what a business does. So when you put in something as you did at the beginning, like green hydrogen or large language models or lithium ion batteries or whatever it is, like, I'm a startup that has something to do with lithium ion batteries. I want to find evidence of investment of other people that have done this similar things. What we have to do as a search engine is go and find portfolio companies of other investors, and actually see who has gained investments in a similar sort of space, and then say, well, these are the people invested in them. Of those firms, here's who's talking about it. So therefore, you've got this evidence trail. Go, okay, so I do this. You invested in a thing that's pretty similar. Let's chat. And I think you're the right person to talk to because you seem to be the person who's leading the charge on talking about the stuff. Can we go from here? As we said at the beginning, you still need to establish a human connection, but that's a good first start in. So we have to look at that anyway. And one of the things we spent ages going backwards and forwards in looking at topping modeling techniques, which are now sort of everybody's like, oh, that was very exciting a couple of years ago. And everybody goes, oh, who needs that? Well, not that's not there. It's that far too flippant. Not who needs that, but it's not the it's not the acronym that everybody's excited about, right now.
Right.
The overwhelming need to classify is not helpful. What you want to do is get the data to be telling you what is this. So if you sit there going, I want to know in Wales how many businesses have or have got anything to do with car part manufacturing. What you're going to do is come to our search engine, put car part manufacturing, and we can start surfacing all the things that are related to it, and looking and go, here are the companies that have received investment that are to do with car part manufacturing, and that's a natural consequence of just having to have the data to run a search engine. And it's all publicly available information. There's nothing, you're not doing anything malicious. You're not getting anybody's secret information or dirty information. You're simply going around looking at people's websites and pulling that, good old-fashioned crawling information, but pulling that together. And I think the insight that we would like to have it is that verticals are bloody useless. They just don't help anybody, other than an analyst who is having to put together a report for their boss who insists that there is a vertical, or a treasury official, an analyst for a treasury official who insists there is a vertical. In any real sense, verticals just aren't helpful at all. So yeah, I guess there's a couple of things.
Very insightful. And in terms of your platform itself, I mean, it does a lot, right? I remember playing. I did actually log in previously although earlier when I went on it, I wasn't logged in. I have actually been on it. It looks like it can do a lot. Obviously, you can be quite refined with it, as you said, and really sort of hone in on what it is you're looking for. Have you got any sort of good tips on how to get the best results out of using it?
First, be specific. So actually be a founder.
Right.
So it's a tool for founders. I tell you, the people that really struggle using it is somebody who's like, this is it's really such an interesting thing. You got a founder, they come in, you're going, what is your business? They'll tell you exactly what the business does.
Yeah.
Right. Put that in. And even you could make it a very long phrase, even if you got it down to just a word, put in, I do this, and just put it in as a search, what you actually do. The problem for founders, but also they'll speak to maybe speak to advice. I can help you with your raise. What do you do? Fintech, medtech, martech?
Right. And then you end up with that problem you were literally just talking about. Right.
So you can put into our search engine fintech or martech, and you'll get everybody who's just written the word fintech, or had something about fintech. It doesn't actually help you very much. So be a founder, because founders are much better at this than the advisors. The advisors helping with them just go, I need you to, I can only help you if you're going to, I want to know, are you seed, series A, and pre-seed? I want to know which bucket can I put you in? And then I've got a list of 500 people I speak to. I'm going to spam your pitch deck out to those 500 people that I speak to in that bucket, and hopefully one of them comes back and I can collect my fee. If you're a founder, you go, no, but I need to know someone who actually gets this. A good example, wasn't my business. I worked in this business, but I knew the CEO and founder reasonably well. I worked at a company that did FX connectivity. And so if you talk to any sort of VC people about that, they direct you to people doing payments or international payments. It's like, you don't get, this business is about transferring data accurately in the fastest way possible within a data center and across to another data center, but particularly within a data center. You're talking about how to shave milliseconds and microseconds off transfer of accurate data transfer so that FX trading can happen. That's the people who will get this business. Someone who's doing payments isn't going to understand this at all. Whereas an advisor sits there and goes, oh, you're foreign exchange, payments-y stuff. So come in and doing something very, very specific. So you as the founder know exactly what you know, who that person who's going to get your business. You can sit there and read it. So put in a very specific search term. One of the earlier things we had, and we were like, God, we got a hit on it, was mesenchymal stem cells. It wasn't even stem cell research. It was mesenchymal stem cell research. There's not even, it's bugger me, there's actually a result. Bloody hell. So, and it's like, yeah, there you go. There's an investor that's actually talking about mesenchymal stem cell research. Not as I said, not just stem cell, but it's like, the two of you should talk. Was one because certainly myself and my co-founder, we did a lot of the initial stuff. We put it out online, but a lot of it was doing demo calls with people getting the feedback, watching them use it, learning how to use it. The other thing I could say about our tool, just specifically, and we will do something on this later, but it's not a directory. So if you want to know, it was this way. On our search bar, I'm looking at my screen. It starts searching by topic to find investors and investments. What it's not built for, just to be clear, is you can't just go and write, I'll pick one that begins with A so I don't get in trouble. Anthemis. And it'll do it. You will find stuff, but it's not built as a directory structure. We will come to that, but it's built as a search engine, not as a directory. So yeah, and that is something that people come out with. But yeah, it's find that needle in the haystack. We had lots of various attempts at trying to explain the idea. It's like find the needle in the haystack. The what three words of the venture capital words. Get not just to the right street, but to the right building, but to the right desk.
Yeah, I like that. That's a nice.
What we'll get into.
That's a nice way of putting it. Yeah. So essentially, you give it generalist search parameters, it will give you general search results. So, essentially. Yeah.
In the same way as if you go to, and it's a way of thinking though that. They just cut out.
Yeah, my co-founder calls them the slow pods. So the what happens when you're driving with the Apple glasses on? And
the car stops on the M25.
Yeah, hopefully, or just carries on the M25. Either way is bad, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, where were we?
I was saying about how you give it generalist search parameters, it will give you general results back. But you were saying that I can't remember what you were saying. I think you were about to make a comparison to like other search engines. Essentially, it's the same sort of thing.
It is a thing. It's a thing about. So this is why founders are better at it, because they just want to get to the answer. If someone's generally looking at stuff, they'll go, well, they almost start off with a. This is why I said the industry being stuck in the 90s. It was fascinating when we started the business. People were still thinking in terms of Boolean search.
Right.
And they were thinking in terms of narrowing down. I'm going to a database. I'm going to add a data query that filters. So I'm going to start off with the United Kingdom. Then I'm going to put down England or Wales or Scotland. And then I'm going to put down financial services. And I'm going to get, this is how people who are using data systems and have used them all their lives come into. And that was one of the problems we have with the search. It was like, you just stop telling me narrow down. You don't go, when you go to look for a restaurant, you don't just go, tell me all the restaurants in the UK. That is useless to you. You're on a street in the pub, you're hungry. You want to know, like, I want Chinese and I am here. Click.
You're trying to find the fastest route to something as opposed to all of the ways of getting there. You want the one that goes straight to it. Yeah.
Whereas the founders, when they use it, and this is why if you look at our usage stats as well, we target our marketing this way, but it's also people who are just, I think it's the morality coming out. The founders get it because I don't want to know. Like, again, I'm in the pub. I'm here and I want a Chinese. I have no interest in how many restaurants are in the UK. That is nothing to do with my use case whatsoever. I want to know exactly what I want. So they're brilliant at it because they come in and just go, like, I need to know about diesel emission reduction technology, and they just write that in and. Bang, results come out. So,
well, look, I mean, I can tell you straight off the bat, I'm going to be using it as a founder of a SaaS product in stealth currently. This is going to become very useful in the next few months for us. So I'm excited to actually be using it. But I mean, I think even what you said though, it's still useful for founders who are listening to this who maybe not heard of it. The good advice on good best practice on how to utilize it and maximize the sort of the results from it. But yeah, it's very, very. It's really. I can see it being quite groundbreaking. I mean, how long has it been? When did you launch?
So we launched like full public version end of September the 30th last year.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty new. We started working on the technology. So talking about support we've been given, which is fantastic. So we got an Innovate UK grant in November 2020. And then we also had support from Smart Cymru, and a whole series of wonderful angel investors, and also the University of Wales Trinity St David has been an active supporter and given us some press support as well in Swansea. So just a lot of support from a lot of people. So, but we were in build mode. In 2021, we had basically sort of a, I'd lovingly call it a beta product, but I think it was, even that was pushing it. It certainly wasn't MVP, was out there, but we were pushing that out and seeing, can we sell on beta? If we get come out, and where are we? But out there talking to a lot of people, getting a lot of usage, and then that formed us into that was through 2021. Then 2022 was getting the product out basically. So which we launched in September the 30th. Last year, and then so user numbers increasing roughly 100% a month, which is great coming up. So, but so just getting out there and continuous product improvement. So there is actually a significant upgrade we're doing to the back end. So there won't be too much visibility of the front end, but on the back end next week, and the ability to take the data global as well. So at the moment, UK data that's on the system. But as I said, one of the things we're passionate about is that location only matters if you're doing things in an old-fashioned shitty spray and pray way. You know exactly that you've got something that an investor in the west coast of America or Sydney, Australia, like this is, oh my God, this is that, they're talking about these things. You can get on the phone and it may be like a really awkward time zone conversation where they're going, that's the business. I get you. So the upgrades we're doing next week also expand the data set to be global, and we're really excited about that because
that's huge.
I mean, I don't need to tell you. I mean, you can go through a list. I mean, there are lists out there floating around. All my LinkedIn posts is filled with, DM me and I'll send you a list of 6,000. Stuff like that. But it's actually quite. So why did Ship Shape not exist before? It's also because the growth and scale of. It was interesting. It didn't come up till now, but it certainly wasn't needed in the noughties. There just weren't. You didn't need a search, and you need a search engine where there's just the sheer number of participants and data available, and the network that you're trying to navigate across gets to a certain size. And this only came up in the UK. The tax change for the EIS and EIS framework, but the general cultural change of actually acceptance of startup as a reasonable career to be in, rather than something just smelly uni students did, and then they went and got proper jobs. So that cultural change that happened has caused this boom in the UK, and obviously the US was ahead in that. But now you've got to the stage where there just are a large number of people involved. So if you're talking about just people on the investment teams of investment entities that you'd want to be talking to, you're talking about tens of thousands of people, and each one of those investment entities has invested over a time on average. We found actually funny, it's 16 isn't the average so far of the number of portfolio companies per investment entity that we've actually discovered. And again, the portfolio company is a really important signal, because you sit there going, okay, this person's talking stuff, but have they actually invested? Has the company they work at invested in anything that's related to me? Another thing, by the way, on AI that AI will solve in the future, but it's actually too hard to do at the moment, is the identification of, may be able to solve in the future. AI may be able to solve that, but the only person who can have a really good view of whether let me take this back. You find a company that's been invested in, you go, that's really close to me. You find he's invested in it. You have to decide, is that friend or foe?
Right. Yeah.
Are they too close?
Yeah. Is there a conflict of interest?
Very subjective. That some of it isn't subjective, like they actually do exactly the same thing as I do. That's not subjective. And in fact, that's a problem, because I thought I was the only person doing it in the world, and now I've discovered there is someone doing exactly the same as me. And I'll bugger, they did a Series A last year and I'm still at pre-seed. That's a problem. But more commonly, it's like, it's close, but it's not quite. And it's the founder who has to make that decision about, I'm actually comfortable sharing my data and with this person. But the portfolio companies themselves are really strong signals, and there's just we're talking about 6 figures worth of portfolio companies to search to. So you need search technology to actually take you through this. So we're kind of astounded, like we're out there, we're doing it, and we're growing this, and there's nobody else doing it in this way. which kind of astounds us sometimes. But on the other hand, maybe not, because we now know how bloody hard it is to do. The introduction of all this, coming back to the beginning of the class, would the introduction, had the technologies that are around now, in terms of generative AI, blah, 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 been around even in 2021, when we started developing first lines of code for this, would it have meant that we could have turned this around in weeks? No. It's also to do with my personal views on moat or not. There's no such thing as there are very few businesses that have a single killer moat. The moat for Ship Shape is that there are a long series of things that take 3 days each to do, none of which are on their own a moat, but the collection of everything that we've done and the integration of it together, that's the moat.
Yeah.
And it's also why it's hard to do. And say, we could do some of these things quickly, but again, going back to the earlier point, it's not as if code generations actually got invented this year. So a lot of this stuff was there beforehand. Terraform was there beforehand. GitOps was there beforehand. Flux was there beforehand. So
you still had to do the work, basically. Yeah. So you mentioned about how the platform works at the moment. So I'm interested to know. Obviously, you're that point of being able to point people. Essentially, your platform can point people in the right direction. Like you said, search results to be able to find the individuals that you would want to ideally connect with as a founder. Does the platform then? Is there any way the platform's able to sort of track whether or not these pairings have been developed into a successful investment? I mean, presumably that's now all off platform, so you don't have any way of tracking whether or not you're making successful introduction or providing results, that leads to successful investments, or are you somehow managing to do that in another way?
As we're choosing not to at the moment, because we wanted to make it the least there was no solution we could come up with that didn't feel like an intrusion or asking people to share data.
Right.
There may be a future when there's a recognition that people sharing that data, and obviously you have to make it incredibly easy to do, or nobody will actually do it, or it has to be signals to do it, so to come through. Then you could do that mapping later. There is obviously a way of doing it in the UK, sort of, because we have this thing called Companies House in the UK. Even though it's not an exact match, because the investment, you can find someone gets introduced to someone at a company, they don't make the investment, then that person moves to a different company. That company is actually then makes an investment from that initial investment. But Companies House has actually got the name of the LP, for example, behind it rather than anything else. There's a series of, even then with Company House data, it's not a perfect thing. But globally, that would be, where's the data source to actually do that? But I think in general, we decided that we didn't want people to feel that they're being tracked.
Yeah.
So the best way to do it was don't. You can come and use this with freedom. And, and
then presumably you would have to in some way build part of the platform that, like you said, that essentially tracks that entire journey, which would feel intrusive and be a high friction experience, wouldn't it? But I suppose in some ways,
it is possible to, but only when it has to be demanded. Basically, demand rather than us forcing it on people. It needs to be demanded. It's like basically turning it. It's a sales process turning into a CRM. So you're putting a CRM system on top of this, and then go from there. But there are CRMs like from us. I'm simply sitting going, why? I don't want to be made to use your CRM system. I've either got one which is Excel or HubSpot or Zoho or whatever. If I'm working at a place with lots of money, I might have a Salesforce one, but I don't want to type. I don't want to force.
I love the fact that that's still a thing that people say about Salesforce as well. Like, if you're rich, Salesforce.
But you can come onto our thing. So we went for this. We went all the way through the early iterations and just went back going. It's why if you look at our thing, it's a search bar. It's a very classic search bar. Another company may have a search bar. They might be bigger than us. There might be a search engine. I'm not sure if I can name them, but search bar in the middle. Our search bar's even got rounded edges on the side of it. Familiar as a search bar. So people come onto it and they go, that's a search engine, that is. And you know how easy it is that you just use you go on, you get what you want, your service straight away. Wanted to make the user experience as simple as possible for the user. Just don't put barriers in the way of people trying to use the solution.
But it's like you said, if you go down the route then of adding a CRM and these other elements, I mean, you are straying from what you mentioned at the beginning, which was that you're now no longer doing one thing extremely well. You're now trying to balance doing two things extremely well, and inevitably that means you end up doing two things mediocre or good but not well.
Exactly.
So you'll focus on this, and I think I mean, if that's something you want to come back to, then great. But I suppose the other,
if I can just riff on that one more point, which is people who would do that, people who are because there's a lot of, as I dissed some of the bad advice, we've got a lot of very good advisors that we also know and work with, and they will refer us because we're not cutting their grass. So we basically want to be the search, and then everybody else is doing that. Just use us as the backbone, and sure, at some point in the future you might decide differently, but I don't think we would, because hopefully there are enough people just using us and referring people through to us that the best commercial thing for us to do is not cut their grass. We just, because they're our partners in that case.
Yeah. But it's interesting because my so there was two recent experiences that I had that are a great example of someone trying to do something claiming it can do lots of stuff poorly, compared to something that's just concentrated on doing one thing really well. I had so my wife went and bought some. We're getting some decking done. It's the bloke's actually out there today, and we have to get it treated. And so I was like, right, when you're going shopping, can you pick up some treatment for it and some oil? You need the two processes. And then she's at the shop and she calls me. She says, "Oh, there's a 2-in-1 thing." I was like, "No, don't get a 2-in-1, because the chances are it's going to do both of those things badly compared to something." It's but it's cheaper. Doesn't matter. Get the two things. And the other example of that is actually more software related, which is there was this company that approached me recently, as is often the case. Plenty of DMs trying to sell me stuff, whatever. But what caught my eye was that they claimed they could do a massive list of things: CRM, project tracking, invoices, expensing. It was basically Trello, HubSpot, all of these tools that I use, but in one. And I was like, well, if this is true, I no longer need about 30 different tools I'm using. This thing can do everything, even Slack, Team, everything. And I was like, this sounds too good to be true. I have to see what this is all about. I jumped on the demo, one of the worst demos I think I've ever been on. And while the product was sort of somewhat impressive, it was just doing everything badly. They didn't have anything in there that was making me go, wow. It was a terrible CRM. It was a terrible expense tracking. It was a terrible invoice raising. It was all just, it did the stuff you expected it to do, but it wasn't great. And not only that, but it wasn't helped by the fact that the people who were doing it weren't very good at selling and weren't very good at demoing and all that. But that just felt like, okay, well, this is a systemic problem in your company then, because of it. You also have not only a generalist product, but a generalist approach to the people who are in your company as a result. So now I have no trust in your company's ability to do anything well, especially not even they said they were going to send me access to a trial account. That was last week. I still haven't heard from them.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's just so I am on that train. Do something really, really, really fucking well.
Yeah.
But it's really exciting. We're out of time, and I know you probably want to get out of here, because I've been chewing we've been chewing each other's ear off now for quite a while. But really quickly before I do, what does the future look like then? You've obviously alluded to bits and bobs of it, but what would you say the future is for Ship Shape now, looking ahead for the next couple of years?
So definitely.
Excuse me, that was poorly timed.
But no, I'll just keep it to say. Bless you.
Sorry.
Taking this thing global. So taking this thing global and just being the known people for, as I said, this one thing. There's lots of other things that will happen off the side of it, but I think that's not the main focus. Is for us is staying on track, basically. So add US data, add data from various places, around the world, be the place where, because what you can't do on our system at the moment, for example, you will be able to do very soon is also look at individual pieces of funding news. So, and again, we just want to be that place, and we think we can be that place in the next couple of years. Nobody will come anywhere else other than this, because if we do it right, and we're intending on doing it right, and fingers crossed we do, because we've spent this time building a technology foundation that can allow us to do so. So as long as we build on our own foundations correctly, which we might not, but we try. As long as we build on our foundations correctly, we'll be able to produce something that is just a no-brainer for people. And it's a closed ecosystem, but I don't know if we're going to ever be a verb in the way of like Googling things, but I'd like it to be just, in the next couple of years, it'd be a no-brainer to do this thing. People just come to, they don't think about it, they just come on us and they just
ship shape it.
Yeah, just ship shape it. Yeah.
That's anyway. You've got to start just using the word, and then people will. Like, you use it as a verb, and then people will, catch on. I'll start doing it if you start doing it.
Yeah, all right, deal.
Yeah, but look, I honestly, I think I could speak for another 2 hours on this. I would still, and maybe in the future we'll have to get you back on again, and as things have progressed, to see where things are, because if I would still have in my brain a ton of questions about what you guys are doing, and could easily get in really deep in the weeds on it. But I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much for jumping on. I really appreciate it. And yeah, we'll keep in touch, and I'll be following along very, very closely. Like I said, for my own selfish reasons, as well as just being a huge tech startup geek. So yeah, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
No, great, thank you. It was a very enjoyable time. So, and I hope that your listeners, well, it'll be interesting, particularly in the beginning part, there was all sorts of ideas being bubbled around a little bit by you, but mostly by me. It'd be interesting if you get some comments of that guy's an idiot. What's he doing?
No, don't worry. So far, comments are, as of the fact that it's a very young podcast, comments are limited anyway. But if we do get them, I'd imagine it will be mostly about me. Like, why didn't you ask him this? You had a really intelligent guy on, and you asked him about that. What the fuck? You asked him for book recommendations? What are you doing, you idiot?
Well, you know the answer. Have you? I'm not answering your question until you have stated and proved that you have read the Hitchhiker's Guide.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You're not allowed to comment unless you have some proof. Yeah, and that you went to Oxford and you're not from Swindon.
Yeah.
Yeah. All
right.
Have a lovely day.
Okay.
Enjoy the weekend.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching and/or listening. Please like, subscribe, and join the conversation in the comments below.